Today on Voice of the Valleys, Mike Tapp, the Labour Minister, has gotten himself in hot water with the left, again, for pressing the issue and saying that they're going to be investigating the links between culture and ethnicity and all of these other factors you're not supposed to turn an eye towards with regards to heinous crimes committed on UK soil. Just so happens that this backlash from the left came at a point where the news cycle seems to be nothing but cases of heinous migrant crimes, as we will go into, and all of that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys, yet again with your host, friend and neighbourhood far-right thug, always satirical unless he's not, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. It is Wednesday, the 10th of December, at time of recording, currently 10 to 6 in the evening. Hopefully be out on the same evening or night. If not, it might be just tomorrow morning by the time that you are seeing this. Obviously, when these are recorded, things are liable to change. I know I probably should state this at the start of every, commentary or whatever, that a lot of these issues are potentially liable to change depending on how things progress from their forth from when they are reported and such. Just before we start today, I want to give a massive shout out and a massive thank you to one person in particular. Everybody, obviously, I appreciate who leaves comment, likes, shares the video, especially on YouTube. YouTube does this quite nice thing for all of the censorship stuff and everything like that. It does this quite nice thing where it gives you like a recap, of your performance every week, right? How many views you got, how many comments, likes, shares, all of that stuff. Appreciate everybody that shares it. Appreciate everybody that leaves comments, especially the supporting ones. Obviously, that goes without saying. I wanted to highlight one in particular, though, one that I should really appreciate. It really made my, really massively positively affected me. I'm struggling to find the words at the moment to go over how much I appreciate this. I had my first super thanks on YouTube recently, and as a result, I wanted to thank this person personally at the start of this episode. They go by Eve Beaumont. Thank you very much, Eve. I greatly appreciate it. Who left the comment with the super chat, or super thanks, sorry. Authentic, in-depth channel with viewpoints I share. Always good listen. Thank you. And that's obviously massive thank you to you. Massive thank you to you, not only for the comment, but obviously for the support. I can't put into words really how much I appreciate it, especially at this point in time. But I really appreciate that. I hope that at the very least that it is the authentic viewpoints of myself and that you can see that they're not contrived. I'm not trying to grift off of anything or anything like that. Every story I bring to light, everything that I talk about, it's coming from a place of honesty of how I really feel about it and actually trying to provide valuable and insightful commentary on it. Obviously, I'm not an expert. I'm not a quote-unquote political scientist or political analyst or anything like that, but politics affects everybody, so it's everybody's duty to at least be somewhat invested in it, and obviously that comes with talking about it. The biggest thing that the government wants in order to, especially the UK government and all manner of governments, as we'll get onto in a moment, want to push through their totalitarian legislation. They don't want you talking about it. They don't want you talking about these things at all because, again, out of sight, out of mind, or in this case, out of ears, out of mind, right? If we're not talking about it, it's easy to not think about it, and if we don't think about it, then it's very easy to not see what's going on and not see the change that we've made. That's why we're in so much trouble, because we're sleepwalking into things. We're sleepwalking into things because more often than not, people don't want to talk about it because already they're scared. They don't even want to have the discussion, right? And a lot of the times as well, as we've seen, very, very sad, 3-month anniversary today, time of recording, of when the life of somebody that was a champion of dialogue and champion of disagreement, but solving it through dialogue, had his life taken from him. For that exact reason, and because there were so many lies spun up about him and all of this stuff, right? And obviously, there's all manner of conspiracy theories about it. I'm not going to go down that route. I don't think at this present moment in time a lot of them hold that much water. I've seen a lot of people making fantastical claims, but again, fantastical claims require fantastical evidence. We'll get into a lot of that today, but I want to start off with, as I mentioned before, that Mike Tapp, the Labour Minister, whom I would likely very much disagree with on a hell of a lot. He seems to be very pro-digital ID, obviously pro-immigration in certain elements, right? But he's actually pushed the boat forward, at least in terms of what Labour are doing and trying to seem maybe as though they've got a veneer of care for victims of gangs, stuff like that, right? seems to put forward a veneer that he actually wants to do something about it, or that Labour wants to do something about it. On GB News, he said, and apparently this has echoed remarks from Shabana Mahmood as well, we must identify and address any links between ethnicity, religion and culture and child. We won't turn away from this. Victims come first. Now, obviously, that's the whole thing. This is the whole thing that's been turned away from for the last nearly, 80 years or so, since the early 50s. The early 50s, I believe it was 1955, in Bradford, I believe it was. I've got the headline somewhere, that a gang of 4 Pakistani males, right, in Britain had carnal knowledge, it was called at the time, of a 15-year-old girl. That was back in the 50s. And it's been denied for generations, right? Victims have lost their lives. They've been murdered, right? They've been put through heinous torture. And every time the government covered it up, it only emboldened the criminals more and more and more. And there's no words to describe. There's no words to describe. I linked in a post on YouTube recently a lot of the excerpts and stuff and court reports that are coming out on an online resource. You should go and check them out. You should go and read them and make sure you share them. People have been trying to get this information out for decades, right? And it's been stifled at every turn. Labour, being one of the primary ones doing it, they've been one of the primary drivers of this diversity initiative, especially with Blair, but it goes back way further than him. But this has got the lefties, especially on the far left, like the Greens and stuff like that, massively up in arms. And other political commentators like Owen Jones and others have been saying, what the hell is going on? This is a Labour minister, and he's talking about potential links between ethnicity, religion and culture and child. All of the lefties have been up in arms over this, but it's because they don't like it. They don't like it now that these conversations are being forced, and they've had to be forced because of how much they've been covered up, as I said, for generations. Here's what Mike Tapp had to say. Let's see if we can really find any problems with it.
But it's also very important. And what we won't do is turn away from this. And it's about ensuring that if there is a link between ethnicity, between race, between culture, that we identify that so that we can deal with it, whether it's because, one of the reasons that the perpetrators are committing this crime or one of the reasons that some have turned away from it. We need to get to the bottom of it, and I'm confident we will. But it's also
not giving the benefit of the doubt until we actually start seeing some results. That's my first thing. Until we actually start seeing that they're actually serious about this, right? Still, we start seeing that they're actually serious about it. And I don't necessarily think that they are. I believe it was recently the Oldham inquiry completely collapsed. There have been many of the victims now that were working on the inquiry with the government that have walked away from it. Because again, they want to avoid these things. At the moment, just seems like a lot of empty words. But those empty words, or at least in my opinion currently, empty words, did not stop a bunch of lefties from losing it in the quotes to this post, right? So some pointing out some data saying that, the biggest representatives are white British and stuff like that. Again, trying to deny the link between culture, religion, ethnicity, these kinds of things. A person by the name of Ross McCafferty, who is a journalist and editor, I don't know if he's what paper he's with. It doesn't actually say in his bio. It says, "I'm sorry, what? A quote-unquote link between ethnicity and child? What the f-?" And then Owen Jones chimed in as well, quoting Mike Tapp and saying, "This is a Labour minister. What the f-?" All of these people basically acting as genocide apologists, because you only need to read a lot of the excerpts. You only need to read a lot of the excerpts to see the blatant racial and religious motivations on a lot of the people that have committed these heinous acts, calling them white slags and saying this is what white girls are for, right? Raymond Ibrahim, another prominent political commentator and an Orthodox Christian, I believe, in America, done a tremendous video. It'll be linked down below on this exact topic. He explains it far better than what I can, and he's written, books on Islam and all stuff like that, right? But goes back through a lot of historical instances on how, in particular, it seems Muslims from these areas of the world have viewed European, whiter, lighter-skinned women in particular. And there's a long-standing historical precedent for this behavior. Obviously, they want to deny it because it cuts right at the heart of their diversity narrative. And it completely destroys it. Completely blows it out the water. There's no saving it. There's no saving it. We already have some bits of it coming through, which obviously if you've been paying attention, you'll already know. We already have some bits of it coming through, such as some parts of this data set from Operation Stovewood, for example, which I've cited time and time again, but again, you'll be able to find this now as well. This is from an example from Rotherham, I believe it is. National Crime Agency, Operation Stovewood in Rotherham. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see all of the text on the actual screen itself. I'll just have to recrop it a moment. But again, I've cited this data before. It analyzed over 300 cases. I believe it was about 323 cases, if I'm not mistaken, of, child in Rotherham. And you'll see quite clearly, seemingly, the relationship, and as we've seen with the perpetrators as well, data I covered before showing that the vast amount of perpetrators were white British girls. There were a couple of other slight minorities in there, like Sikhs and stuff like that, right? But there was very predominantly, talking in most cases, well over 80-90% young white British girls that were the targeted victims. National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood pursues historical cases of child and child exploitation in Rotherham. This first pie chart depicts the ethnic breakdown for a total of 323 designated CSAE suspects in Operation Stovewood, with nearly 2/3 coming from a Pakistani background. Significantly higher than the proportion of South Yorkshire's or Rotherham's Pakistani ethnic population, 2.4% and 4% respectively. So you can imagine the lefties do not want to tangle with this data. There's actually another one, however, you go down to the next page. For example, there's another one. Pie chart shows the ethnic breakdown for a total of 42 individuals convicted for CSAE offences under Operation Stovewood, again with nearly 2/3 recorded coming from a Pakistani ethnic background. So forgive people for thinking there might be a link between ethnicity and child here, at least in this one area, especially when you see that the amount of people in this area, you're talking about an average population of about 3%. Being responsible for 2/3. Not to mention then, I want to say that again, how much British people are massively overrepresented in the cases of this, like Rotherham, for example. Only 22%, less than 1 in 4. Less than 1 in 4 were British perpetrators. And again, British has been used to mean anything nowadays. So again, presumably it would mean either English or Welsh or Scottish, right? One of those distinct ethnicities. Right, but you can see then you've got Yemeni, you've got Bangladeshi, you've got Jamaican, you've got Zimbabwean, you've got Ivorian Polish in there as well. So by doing that, we can see that over 4 in 5, or just under 4 in 5, literally 2% under 4 in 5, people that committed these crimes, at least in this one example, not British. Not British. A lot of them then coming from areas of the world where you are going to have questions over religious motivations, because a lot of these areas of the world are very, very religious and ardent followers of one religion in particular, the one you're not allowed to criticize. But what we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some empirical data. We've gone through a little bit of empirical data with Operation Stovewood. We've got a little bit coming up later on Talk TV. It's been apparently quite an interesting stat being bandied around at the moment, which is apparently that 25% of all crimes, all of them, were committed by foreign nationals in the UK. Doesn't include those who have obtained British citizenship or their descendants were born in the UK either. We'll move on to that a little bit later. But all of this has come at a time where currently in the news cycle, there's just been example after example after example of migrant child, all of these heinous crimes, muggings, right? For some reason, they made a guy and a girl, or a guy and a woman in France stripped naked, right? It appears to be, right? We'll get onto all of these examples as we'll go. The first one which you may have seen making headlines at the moment, the chilling footage that shows 2 Afghans, there's been more information that's come out since then, which is important to go over as well, that have been convicted, it seems, right, for the horrific of a 15-year-old girl in Leamington Spa in the UK. Both of them only arriving, having only arrived on a boat a couple of months prior. The footage, it was said at the time, if it was released to the public, would be so bad that it would cause riots. That's how bad of crimes we are talking here. Now, I'm going to play this video for you as well as we go. I don't know what outlet it's from. Tommy Robinson reposted it online on X. This is the video that's been circulating at the moment of these two quote-unquote asylum seekers. Again, you're talking 17-year-old, how old was it? 17 and 5, the two 17-year-olds. There we go. Two 17-year-old asylum seekers, right? That frog marched a young girl off. And as far as I know, the really heartbreaking thing is that this young girl, I'm going to move my webcam up just slightly because I realize I'm very close to the top of the view. There we are. This young girl, as far as I'm aware, if it is the correct case that is being referred to, was calling for help, and sadly nobody intervened. There was a couple of people that passed by. She was apparently pleading, saying, "No, you're going to me. I don't want to go," and shouting at passers-by to help her. Sadly, nobody did. And then she was subjected to this heinous attack. Here's the moment that she was being walked away by these people. Right, this is from The Sun, says it in the corner. Two teenage migrants, a terrified 15-year-old schoolgirl in a park just months after arriving the UK as well. You can see them walking her away. She's trying to resist, you can clearly see. I don't know whether that's maybe her phone that's on. She's trying to record it or whatever. Afghan asylum seekers, let's just read these names. Jan Jahanzeb and Isra Niyazal, both 17, were sentenced to youth detention terms of 10 years and 8 months and 9 years, 10 months, respectively. Never ever shouldn't have been here. Pay across the channel as unaccompanied minors attacked the youngster in Leamington Spa. This was the incident, I believe, that again, they were told, this is the one, it was in Warwickshire, obviously this Leamington Spa in Warwickshire, that there was going to be riots over. So you can see there, she's trying to record it. And this way again, I think the words were captured on the audio saying, "No, you're going to rape me," and just no words. Absolutely no words. You can find the clip down below, ladies and gentlemen. You can find the clip down below. Barristers for the pair unsuccessfully tried to stop their names being made public, saying it could lead to widespread public disorder. Yeah, I wonder why. Because how many more of these cases do we need to put up with? There's a little bit more on this, however, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit more about these quote-unquote asylum seekers, right? That I think would be quite important. Daily Mail reporting in this instance. Afghan asylum seeker charted his journey across Europe, posing in TikTok videos, clad in designer gear and a gold watch, before arriving in the UK, where he raped a 15-year-old schoolgirl. Yes, it is the same person. Jan Jahanzeb, often clad in designer gear with expensive trainers. This is the image that he projected to the world once he arrived in Europe from Afghanistan. I'll bring the article up on screen for you now as well. I'm just reformatting it so that it sits on the screen a little bit better. So you can see here the names will be common across the two stories that we just read, or across the two examples that we just read, the video and this article in question. Afghan quote-unquote asylum seeker jailed for brutally a 15-year-old British schoolgirl in a park charted his journey across Europe on TikTok, often clad in designer gear with expensive trainers, right? This is the image that Jan Jahanzeb projected to the world when he arrived in Europe from Afghanistan. But behind the sick facade, the boyish good looks lurked a predator who has been jailed for 10 years and 8 months for the brutal 15-year-old girl. Odds are he'd be released early. I mean, he's only been put in a youth defenders institution anyway, obviously being 17. In Leamington Spa in Warwickshire, Jahanzeb acted with a friend, fellow Afghan asylum seeker Isra Niyazal, also 17, who was jailed for 9 years and 10 months for luring the victim away from her friends to a wooded area where they forced themselves upon her. Much of the content on Jahanzeb's social media stories is staged around parks and public places in Belgium as he poses shamelessly in selfies, sometimes showing the star tattoos on his neck. He appears to have gotten the tattoo of the 3 stars on his neck, which is a sign he was carrying money and could come from a middle-class background in Afghanistan. These are your asylum seekers, remember? Completely vindicated in this instance. John Carr saying that a lot of these quote-unquote asylum seekers are not in fact asylum seekers at all, basically glorified Nepo babies. Coming from a middle-class background, but yeah, supposed asylum seeker, yeah. You're seeing how, again, the asylum system is just another facet of the wider plans for the immigration system. And that many of these people, not exactly coming from bad backgrounds, right? And the government and all of the other globalist institutions as well are just playing on people's ignorance and empathy. That's what they're playing on. They're playing on people's ignorance and empathy. Ignorance that you won't know or won't care to look, right? And won't care to open your eyes and see it when it's reported to you. And then empathy by showing you exactly what they want to show you. All of the propaganda shots, all of the tears, all of the bombs, all of this stuff, right? To weaponize it, to send them to our countries, because they see them as votes. Because they see them as votes. And ultimately their target is to subjugate you and the immigration system, i.e. the native British person. And that's why they want to do it. Then they're doing it under the guise of democracy then. Because it'd be like, oh, these people were voted in. Bear in mind, the game was completely rigged from the start. The game was completely rigged from the start because your vote share was systematically eradicated. Your vote share was systematically eradicated by unchecked mass immigration and all of the systems that are relying on people's empathy and goodwill, right? Showing you how evil oppressors we are. On one hand, we're being told we're evil oppressors, but the only way our lands could be conquered, right, was not by force, but was by preying on our empathy, preying on our goodwill, preying on our want to help people in need. That's why immigration was the tool of choice for these traitorous politicians, because it could be done under the guise of empathy. They wouldn't be able to destroy Britain. They wouldn't be able to destroy Europe. It's too strong, right? For other governments and other forces, radical terror groups and other governments in these areas where they want to expand the caliphate and all of these things. These areas are too strong. They're too strong to be taken by force. I've seen that with the Reconquista. Seen that with the stand, one of the last battles in Vienna during the last big Islamic colonization effort. Right? These areas are too strong. Very strong and hardy people. Europe and in Britain, or at least they once were. No, it's because they were good people, often stemming from their Christian moral foundations most of the time. Either Catholicism or Orthodoxy or some kind of Anglicanism, whatever, all rallying around the same thing, same kinds of values, right? Maybe different expressions and all of these things. It was the empathy and the actual love for life and humanity that they had to prey on. And that's why then immigration was the destructive weapon that it has been. And then all they had to do was ramp up immigration and stifle people's democratic rights and put labels on them that would get the population to attack them their own. Racist, Islamophobe, xenophobic, all of these things. Far right, Nazi. The people then would police themselves in their own destruction. And that is why it's been so insanely effective. Because it is true, it hasn't just been done to us, we've done it ourselves. And that's where, again, this stops when we say it does. This stops when we say it does. The biggest thing, the biggest hurdle for most people is going to be understanding how much they've been fooled. Nobody likes that, and nobody likes admitting that they were fooled. Nobody likes the feeling of betrayal. It's a universal language, if you will. Being fooled, having the wool pulled over your eyes, being betrayed, a stab in the back. It's a universal language. And think of how many people that have done things, right? The friends they've called names for their political views, right? The horrific things they may have done to their own children. Trans ideology and all of these things, right? All manner of other things. You can go down, talk about people that have had abortions when maybe they didn't need to. Again, there's a debate there whether there's even a situation where you need to have one. Right? But all of these things where you can see how it's played a role in some way, people need to face up to those. Face up to the personal things that they've done, obviously. That's on all of us. That's on all of us. But then understanding how much we've been fooled. How much we've been misled. And it's going to be a lot to come to terms with for a lot of people that I don't think everybody's going to be able to do. That's why this has been so destructive. It's literally destroyed our society from the very roots. Literally destroyed our society from the very roots. And that's why the demographic battle has been so important. Because the roots of the land are its people. The roots of the land are its people. And that's immutable. You'll never be able to change that. We've got a lot more examples coming for you. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Strap in. 2 Afghan migrants are among 4 people charged with a teenage girl in Bristol. So you have the victim was allegedly attacked at a property in the St. Werburgh area of the city on the night of November 29th. Officers from Avon and Somerset Police were alerted the following day. 2 16-year-old boys were arrested at the scene. Police said this week that Afghan national Salman Habib Khail, 18, of Lochlees, obviously it's not of Lochlees, he's of Afghanistan, has been charged with arranging or facilitating the travel of a female with a view to exploitation. So trafficking. So it's trafficking. Don't beat around the bush with it. This is just outright trafficking. Others then, fellow Afghan national Arwan Ahmadzi, 18, of Afghanistan, has been charged with assault. For some reason then, a 20-year-old man, despite being 2 years older than this gentleman, despite being 2 years older than the other gentleman we've mentioned, cannot be named for legal reasons, I wonder why, has been charged with 2 counts of arranging or facilitating the travel of a female with a view to exploitation, and a 16-year-old boy who cannot be legally identified because of his age, okay, that makes sense, has been charged with. All 4 charged over the incident appeared at Bristol Magistrates Court on Saturday. They were remanded in custody, thank God, to appear in Bristol Crown Court on Wednesday, the 7th of January. So we will see what comes of this. We will see what comes of this as well. I dare say there might be a little bit to learn about these 20-year-old man and the 16-year-old boy. Seeing that, again, with the gangs, they operate in packs. They often operate in packs. They're more than happy to work solo a lot of the time if the opportunity presents itself, but they'll often work in packs because it's a lot more effective. Think about it. You got 3 of you to hold one person down, a female, oftentimes a child, that's going to be a lot weaker than you anyway, right? To do whatever you want with, and you can just take it in turns. Just let that image sit in your head for a moment. Really let that scenario play out in your mind. I wouldn't normally say to do this, right? I don't take any pleasure in viewing this kind of stuff, right? My mind's eye in particular is very vivid. Not only seeing it, you're hearing it. Imagine you're a fly on the wall. You're seeing, hearing, damn near experiencing everything. Really let it set in and understand that could be your daughter. That could be your sister. That could be your mother. That could be you. That could be any relative. Could be your friend. Just really let it sit in and feel that on a really deeply emotional level. Then amplify that and make it hundreds of thousands of times worse in some instances, by hundreds of thousands of times, by potentially even over 1 million times. And then you have like the barest understanding of what's been going on in Britain nearly the last 100 years. And then understand that when the girls went to people who were supposed to help them for help, they were often either abused by those people or they sat idly by and didn't do anything, contributed to it, either with their silence or with their tacit acceptance of it. Social workers, care services, all of these things. Think of how now the government, for whatever reason, wants to try and take your kids off you. Like I said, that mother we talked about before, the NHS and the local authorities trying 6 times to have her children taken away from her because she wouldn't put a 15-year-old through a mastectomy when there was no need for it. people have yet still somehow, and I don't think it's actually fully comprehensible to understand how evil the British state is, but not just the British state, not just the successive generations of British governments, but European governments and many other governments as well. And obviously, we have to take stock of our own government. We have to control our own government. Because foreign governments, whatever, they're going to do what they're going to do. It was our government's job and our monarch's job to protect us. Growing up in Britain, modern day, you'd never, ever know what it's like to actually have a government and a monarch work for you, i.e. be on your side. You'd never, ever experienced it. And that's why we cannot keep doing the same thing, expecting to change. We do that, we will be replaced, we will be eliminated. Because our state and our monarch see things to gain from keeping the status quo going. Eventually it will eat them as well, but it would have eaten all of us a long time before that. It would have eaten all of us a long time before that. Another pesky Afghan national has been charged with two 14-year-old girls. This is an Afghan national by the name of Sultani Backlash, 28, was arrested on Sunday following a report of in a flat in Middle Halton, and has been charged with 2 counts of rape of a girl under 16, 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of assault by parents. I don't exactly know what the actual difference is between these different types of legislation, between these different specifics. If anybody can point that out to me in the comments or whatever, please do let me know if you have a little bit of legal experience or whatever. Because again, you start seeing then, obviously you have the 2 counts of rape, and then you have 1 count of sexual assault, and obviously there's things that can count as sexual assault, which then are not directly, but then assuming then maybe it's another body part, not his actual organ that's doing the penetrating, or would it come under a different thing if it was like a foreign object, and would that come under? I don't actually know. So obviously, because I'm not a lawyer. So if anybody can put that down in the comments, greatly appreciate it. But he's been remanded in custody and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court later this morning. This was put up. This article was published Tuesday, December 9th. So it was yesterday. I haven't seen anything more with regards to this at the moment. That he had allegedly been in contact with the victims online before meeting them. So parents, again, you really have to be a massive helicopter parent in this day and age. You absolutely have to. You absolutely have to. Because anyway, your children are growing up with an internet connection. Obviously, they've got an internet connection in school, obviously. Their computers and such. But if they've got a phone especially, they're not safe. They're not safe. You got to think now about, especially thinking about being a parent in the future now, how much scrutiny has to be put now. We can't take the same a parenting approach, the same laissez-faire parenting approach that our parents had, because it's not the same country. It's not the same country. It's not the same technological landscape. It's, the latchkey generation is gone. And there's no getting it back. There's no putting this genie back in the bottle, so to speak. Because of technology, anybody can get at your kids from anywhere. Anybody can get at your kids from anywhere. On the internet, there's no such thing as distance. But then you've got to take into account the ones that are obviously in your country as well, which sadly, do believe this person is still awaiting trial, even though this case now is, I believe, over 1 year old. This was posted yesterday. 1 year ago to the day, there's a 24-year-old young woman only by the name that I can find of Barbara, who was found dead and slaughtered in her small studio in Avignon in France. The one who took her life is named Fouad Lazar, a 34-year-old Moroccan migrant who was already convicted 17 times for extremely serious offences. Machine gun possession was one of them, I believe. Let me just double check the ones that he's actually been pulled up on, because I've got them by here. So apparently he had 17 prior convictions for violent crimes, including stabbing, kidnapping and weapons possession, one of them I know being a machine gun. Why was he out? Why was he out? When he done this, I believe he'd literally not long just come out of prison as well. So the lady's only been named as Barbara, right? Who was 24, was found dead in a pool of blood in her studio. The suspect, Fouad Lazar, born in Morocco, arrested in the Netherlands. He'd been convicted 17 times and had just been released from prison a week before. Ladies and gentlemen, he had just been released from prison a week before. This brings me on to another thing which I want to go over in the aftermath of this case, right? Bringing it up where, again, the restorative justice, obviously not working. The politicized justice system that we have in these countries, obviously not working. And a case where an updated law, because of Irina Zarutska, actually did promote some positive change by forcing a multi-time felon to remain in custody and not be granted cashless bail or anything like that. Here's the article in question, ladies and gentlemen. 34-year-old man born in Morocco was suspected of strangling the 24-year-old woman in her studio apartment last December. The victim's mother had met him shortly before the incident and told the man, born in Morocco, June 1990, has been convicted 17 times. Convicted, mind you, not accused, right? Not charged, convicted 17 times. For death threats, carrying a weapon, kidnapping and confinement with acts of torture or barbarity, aggravated violence, illegal possession of weapons and ammunition, driving without a license, and numerous offences related to drug trafficking. Shouldn't he have already been the rest of his life behind bars? Or maybe even just done away with? Right? But no, then he was able to go out and murder this poor young woman. This poor young French woman. Worse still, the crime boss is now suspected of murder. The 24-year-old Barbara in her Avignon studio apartment last December. She went by the name Erica, had been living in La Balance neighborhood for a few months. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Unemployed, this music, foreign language, and manga enthusiast enjoyed relaxing in Place Pie, or however you say that, in Avignon. Located in the heart of the city, this lively area is surrounded by numerous bars. The young woman's face was familiar there, and it was there where apparently she met Fouad Lazar, who had been released from prison a week earlier. And then on the morning of December 9th, Barbara's sister received a very strange text message from her phone saying, "It's okay, he's gone, it's okay." Message riddled with errors, didn't resemble Barbara's handwriting. Was it written by Fouad to throw people off the scent? Hypothesis seems plausible. In any case, the young woman was completely unreachable after sending it. Barbara's mother went to her daughter's apartment on the morning of Tuesday, December 10th, but the studio was locked and no one answered. She finally contacted the fire department. They called the police to force entry. Inside a horrific scene, Barbara was discovered in a pool of blood, her lower body naked, with blows to her face and a dislocated finger. Her autopsy revealed that she had been strangled. How many more? How many more? So he was finally then arrested on December 25th in Amsterdam, and I believe was actually extradited to France. So like I said, all of our justice systems, especially wanting to show leniency to the perpetrators and cruelty to the innocent, they disappear, according to Matt Van Swol on X, that something known as Irina's Law, which in this instance goes, I believe it's House Bill 307, is affectionately called Irina's Law. House Bill 307, under North Carolina's newly enacted, House Bill 307. It took effect on December 1st and actually mandated pre-trial detention for violent offenders with prior arrests. And now it has actually resulted in Oscar Salorzano, accused of stabbing a man on Charlotte's light rail on December 5th, 2025, was denied bail under this exact law. So again, now we're seeing now that America has obviously had a very, very big problem with this. DeCarlos Brown Jr., I believe, was either had 14 or 15 prior arrests when he was then released and murdered Irina Zarutska, right? And that's all under the restorative justice anti-racist framework, right? Didn't want to give him any harsh penalty because it would have been seen as racist, right? But this guy, the biggest thing is that you're seeing now when we're not enforcing even the most minute of laws, which has now changed my perspective even so much on fare dodgers on public transport. When you see those videos now, I understand why people take it so seriously now. Not just a matter of tax, right? It's not just a matter of tax, but we're seeing now that, and fare evasion and all of these things, right, which is going to make it more expensive for just the regular person who actually does pay their way, right? This guy had already been banned from the light rail for fare evasion, but because they didn't enforce security or anything like that, he was then able to get on, and now he's suspected of stabbing somebody. So you're seeing there, that little thing, not enforcing the fare, right, where you could have seen this guy, maybe recognized him as somebody that should not be on the light rail, right? And again, it's not down to the public to do this. It's not up to the public to do this. Think about it if it's on the London Underground, right? Or any kind of train station where you've got to pay your fee, right? You've got an opportunity there to catch somebody that could then go on to do a very, very serious crime. And if somebody's trying to evade the fare, right, could be, you know, completely innocent. Maybe they just haven't got paid yet and they just need to get to work, right? Okay, whatever. You know, maybe they just work in paycheck to paycheck and it's just been, had one unexpected thing. This month car went out or whatever, right? Obviously, if they're taking public transport, they probably don't have a car, right? But whatever, it could be boiler's gone. They had to spend more money on that to get it fixed or whatever. There's many different scenarios where you could see somebody trying to dodge the fare but not having any real nefarious intentions in mind. They're probably feeling a fair bit of shame doing it, right? It doesn't justify it. Right, doesn't necessarily justify it, but you can understand it. But this guy had already been banned from the light rail, right, and now suspected of stabbing somebody, been accused of stabbing somebody on said light rail. But at least now the law change, that's why these laws absolutely do matter. Restorative justice needs to be kicked out of our judicial system. You're seeing now that these laws, when they do come into effect, actually have a positive effect on the community. Because at least now, nobody's going to be in danger of Mr. Solorzano here potentially going out and slashing up somebody else anyway. Which is a good thing. Which is a good thing. Now, this was the one I wanted to go over as well. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if it actually says this in the article itself. So I will update this if it happens to be wrong. I will update this if it happens to be wrong. Maybe this is me making a little bit of an assumption here, right? Maybe putting a stab out there based on the patterns that we've seen. But if I turn out to be wrong, I will come back and correct it. If I turn out to be wrong and I find out, I will come back and correct it. So there's now an article from Remix News again. Young couple stripped naked and robbed by youth gang after arrival at Airbnb for weekend in Paris. A young man from Narbonne was coerced into a building and robbed before returning to find his Airbnb ransacked as investigators link the incident to a nearby drug dealing spot. A young French couple's weekend trip to Paris turned into a nightmare after a gang of youths. So that's the only description that we have. Apparently there has been DNA that has been collected from this scene, right? But there's been no information on who the youths are, right? Gang of youths first cornered the man at a kebab shop, maybe another clue, bit of information there, forced him to strip and then later looted the couple's rented apartment. Alexandra and Leah, both in their early 20s and originally from Narbonne, had planned a quiet stay together whilst Leah was in Essonne for an internship. A lot of French names in this episode. A lot of French names. Alexandra, familiar with the area through family ties, had joined her for the weekend. They rented a small Airbnb apartment near Parc des Concubus, however you say it, in the southern Parisian suburbs. Now, on the Friday evening, Alexandra went to eat with an old friend at a nearby kebab shop. Nothing seemed unusual until a gang of 8 or 9 youths gathered inside. As I got up to leave, they come up to me and said, "Who are you? Where are you from?" He explained that he was not from the neighborhood, but was told to follow them into a nearby building. "I'll tell myself there are many of them. There's no point in trying to be a man," he recalled. He is outnumbered 8 or 9 to 1 here. Inside, the gang stripped him naked, searched his belongings, and took his documents and phone. They forced him to withdraw €100, the maximum he could take out at that hour, and attempted to negotiate the sale of his iPhone online whilst he watched. They demanded that he unlock the device's iCloud to disable tracking. When the young man was released and returned to the Airbnb, he found that the apartment had been ransacked. Television, microwave, and other goods were gone. Leah, who had been inside at the time, said she unexpectedly came face-to-face with the intruders as she stepped out of the bathroom. Lucky that she wasn't the victim of what could have been a very, very heinous incident. Obviously, doesn't appear that these youths had that on their mind at this point in time, which, again, may be another clue into who they are, potentially. They told me everything was fine, everything was calm, they were there, completely calm. One was smoking hashish, the other was humming whilst others took what they could. The gang reportedly told her they would not take her belongings because they wouldn't steal from girls. And again, maybe another bit of information there as to who we can maybe isolate who these people are, right? And again, I'm alluding to certain stereotypes here, right? I'm obviously alluding to certain stereotypes with the information that we have. There's obviously exceptions to those stereotypes. Could be completely wrong. These could all be 8 or 9 native French youths, right? Obviously, it could be. It could also not be. It's a thing we don't know at this present moment in time. But again, we have a long-standing pattern of similar behaviors from people of certain backgrounds, which, again, you can't blame people then for exercising basic pattern recognition and at least putting it out there, being like, look what could be happening. And obviously, we got to wait until we're told the details. We got to wait till we're told the details if we do get told the details. Parisian cited a source close to the investigation who said the neighborhood was a known hotbed for drug dealing and tourists were regularly preyed upon. The owner of the apartment, who has rented it out for about a year, declined to comment for fear of reprisals, but has filed a complaint. No arrests have been made, but DNA traces are believed to have been found at the scene belonging to the perpetrators, regardless of who they are, because the investigation is still ongoing at this present moment in time. We just hope that, obviously, these criminals are caught, whoever they are and wherever they're from. Another incident now, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, there's just been case after case after case after case at the moment of these things breaking. A British Airways passenger has avoided jail despite harassing woman through a 7-hour flight. Okay, apologies about that, ladies and gentlemen. Had to quickly run to the toilet. So like I was saying, British Airways passenger avoids jail despite harassing woman throughout a 7-hour flight. So in this instance, it is a 45-year-old Lithuanian Paulius Krylavicius, there we say it, appeared at Isleworth Crown Court on Monday, where he received a 9-month jail term suspended for 18 months. I'm just going to call him Krill. Krill admitted groping a woman on the 7-hour journey from Newark, New Jersey to London Heathrow on January 8th of this year. This is now being reported, mind you, in December. During the flight, he repeatedly touched the victim's leg and attempted to pull her towards him. He also placed his arms around her shoulders and told her he was searching for a quote-unquote life partner. The woman was forced to seek help from the cabin crew, who moved her to a different section of the aircraft, and he was detained by police upon landing. He gave no comment during questioning, and it was pretty much as soon as he got on the plane, as soon as he sat down, right, he pretty much started groping her. So again, just not something that should be done. Obviously, causing a fair amount of intimidation. And just obviously very, very creepy. Not the worst, obviously. Not the worst. But again, it's another example. A lot of people, when you talk about migrant crime, a lot of people instantly start thinking you're going to talk about the Middle East, you're going to talk about certain areas of Asia, you're going to talk about the quote-unquote usual suspects and stuff like that, right? First off, what does that tell you? The fact that now that instantly when you bring up these topics, people have a ingrained thought of where you're going to go with them, right? That tells you that subconsciously, even though they'll try and rebut you for it and all of these things, they know, right? They're denying it, but they know that this is taking place, right? Well, this can be from anywhere. We've seen, obviously, the gypsy gangster, whatever his name was, one of the ones that was harassing those young Scottish girls, right? When Lola brandished the knife and the axe, right? I've forgotten his name, but we're seeing that these people, who in this instance, the offense appears to have taken place, as the plane was in the States, right? And this is very quickly, she was moved to a different section of the aircraft. So technically wasn't in Britain, but then obviously he was apprehended in Britain, because obviously that's where the flight was going. So, yeah, these things can come from anywhere. And we've seen that there's many examples of people from like Eastern Europe and places like that operating in their own gangs and stuff like that. In the Operation Stovewood example in that data set, we saw there was a very, very small amount of Polish people that were represented in that data set as well, as an example. So we have a problem, not just with, what many people call the usual suspects for these things, but people from all over. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There's more. Back to France again. A Gambian trio sought after student by 3 men outside a Rome metro station. A 23-year-old reported being by one of the attackers whilst the other 2 held her down. Exactly the example I gave earlier when we were talking about the 4 men on the one girl. Again, well, some of them teens, some of them, young men, for example. This is happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. 23-year-old student was shortly after leaving the Jonio metro station in northern Rome in the early hours of Sunday morning, with authorities reportedly searching for 3 Gambian nationals in connection with the attack. According to investigators, the woman was walking towards a night bus stop when 3 men approached her, restrained her, and dragged her to a secluded area near Via de Val Malena. She reported being raped by one of the attackers while the other 2 held her down. The 3 men immediately then fled the scene. The victim managed to reach a parked vehicle and asked the driver for help. She was taken to Sandro Pertini Hospital. Doctors confirmed the assault and alerted the authorities. Investigators are reconstructing the woman's movements and examining cameras along her route. The attack occurring approximately 350 meters from the Junio station exit. Police are assessing whether the assailants followed the woman from the metro or encountered her on the street. So the surveillance footage is still being collected at this present moment in time. This is not long following the attack that we covered before, as this article mentioned, the 3 Moroccan men, potentially even more, that dragged a young man's fiancée from the car that they were in and her in front of him whilst forcing him to watch while she struggled, begged them to stop, and made all these futile threats and stuff like that. And we covered that then because the liberal commentator who used to be a Republican commentator, I've forgotten his name, Stephen Crowder, eviscerated him on Piers Morgan. I've forgotten his name. Tim something? Is it Tim something? Was the one who said, you could probably fight off a 200-pound man. You look tough. And there's no scenario in which a woman could. There's very, 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 very few scenarios. Unless, there's just no chance. There's just absolutely no chance. It's getting depressing now. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We're still not done. We're still not done. Because this one now, we're coming down to Wales. We're coming down to Wales for this one. Police report of this one is Swansea man jailed after a teenage girl. Swansea man. This man, 48-year-old from the city centre, pleaded not guilty to the offence, with the incident having taken place at his flat on December 6th of 2024. He did admit under interview that he had intercourse with the victim, insisting that it was consensual. Obviously, the victim, aged 13, cannot consent. Now, most Welsh people, ladies and gentlemen, will instinctively understand this. They might go and do the evil anyway, right? That's fair to say. They might go and commit this heinous evil anyway, understanding that it's a heinous evil, but understanding people can, from all backgrounds, can commit evil, and people will go and do it anyway, right? But most Welsh people will instinctively understand that the age of consent in the UK, at least last I checked based on the laws at this present moment in time, is 16 years old, not 13. So 13-year-old by definition cannot consent. Now, why may this Swansea man, ladies and gentlemen, may not understand that? Because he's not a Swansea man at all. He's not from Swansea, not a Welshman. Lukman Oyofo. I hate this highlight sometimes. There we go. Lukman Oyofo. 48-year-old from Swansea. Just as Welsh you and me. At least he got something. He's been sentenced to 10 years. I would imagine that the court's probably finding eventually probably something to do with, institutional racism and all of this. And Mark Drakeford saying that, why are so many black people, for example, being sentenced to prison over white people? And all of these things, right? So I would imagine there'll probably be a case for the lefties to try and let him out early. and stuff like that, probably. You know? Swansea man. Swansea man, ladies and gentlemen. So, for the first hour, we've gone through a little bit of empirical, Operation Stovewood, things like that. Many, many, many anecdotes, you could say, which eventually at some point are going to then total up to empirical evidence. This was now on Talk TV, really hammering the point home seemingly with another empirical example again. With the data now being given by this lawyer, I don't know who his name is. This was in reference, I believe, to the first case we looked at in this episode. The young girl whose footage it said would spark riots. Apparently now, 25% of all crimes in the UK are being committed by foreign nationals. Let's check it out.
Very soon, I don't think the British people are going to be prepared. I'm not talking about riots. I just don't think they're going to be prepared for this stuff to continue. It's abhorrent.
No, and I think, unfortunately, what we are actually seeing is a lot of corners of the establishment are now, rather than tackling the issues that would very justifiably make the British public so outraged, instances such as this, is they're trying to stage manage us. They're trying to control our reactions. They're concealing from us facts. You know, the fact that the Daily Mail had to actually go to court to get such information released, rather than it just being a matter of the administrative process that we're told what is going on in our country, really is indicative that the establishment, which thinks it knows best, is effectively trying to pull the wool over our eyes. We've got a real battle at the moment with proposals that the nationality of someone arrested or charged for an offence be released in the first place. And I actually think those arguing that this information is not in the public interest are doing so from a patronising place of condescension, and actually really only from a position of wanting to hide from the British public what is going on in our country. I mean, we have just enough data now to really understand actually the scale of the problem we do have on our hands here. A quarter of sort of convictions last year were carried out by foreign nationals.
Right, let's just stop and let's just take a minute, because I want to be very, very clear about this. I think it becomes a point of debate when people throw out stuff, right? I want facts only. Just repeat what you just said. For all those people who go, well, either, you know, this is outrageous. None of them. There are far more white offenders, or others who go, they're all this, they're all that. No, let's have some fact. What did you just say about crimes last year? 25%, a quarter of them, yes, you have this information, were carried out by foreign criminals, in effect, people coming into this country, yes?
In 2024, yes, and that is, of course, just those crimes for which individuals were convicted, and we know that there are very low conviction rates, and that doesn't take into account the smaller end of that spectrum, actually, the sort of the heckling, the catcalling.
Obviously, heckling, catcalling, stuff like that, not necessarily, you know, comparable to a lot of the really heinous crimes that you see. Just let that sink in for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Bates there, speaking from the Centre for Migration Control. Right, it's not just some random chancer that's made this up off the top of his head, right? Obviously, this whole guy's whole career, it seems, is to go through this kind of data, right? Because then his job would be to then make recommendations, it would seem, for migration, you know, with him being part of the Centre for Migration Control. So really, is going to be anybody in a much better position to be able to speak on this as somebody for the Centre for Migration Control? Obviously, we've seen there as well that the government has no problem with lying about this stuff. Obviously, as the Home Office and all these other places, they have no problem. Ministers, councillors, you know, MPs, all this stuff, they have no problem lying about this stuff. But 25% was committed by foreign nationals. If what Robert Bates is to be taken or saying here, if what he is saying here is to be taken as credible, 25% of all crimes, taken into account, these are the ones that have just been convicted for. These are just the ones that convictions are for, and obviously conviction rates, as you mentioned, are very low. 25% were committed by foreign nationals. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. This is not even people, as I mentioned before, people who have been awarded British citizenship, descendants that are born in the UK, that in theory then would be naturalised British citizens by their birth. And obviously that's a conversation in and of itself, much longer one to have. If you can have a conversation about that another time. This is just foreign nationals. Just foreign nationals. And they're making up 25% of the convictions. Now, again, you throw in people that have come across, immigrated and got their citizenship status, descendants of those then that are born in the country, factor those in on top. And given that this is just what we have, oftentimes is what we don't know that's a lot scarier. So I would imagine, would not be surprised whatsoever if this is actually in reality a lot higher. Governments like, don't believe your lying eyes and ears. And the best data seemingly that we have to go on at this moment in time points to 25% of just foreign nationals. 25% of the crimes, all of them, just being committed by foreign nationals. Again, not including foreigners that have got British citizenship and descendants and so on. Just let that sink in. The scale of the problem. 1 in 4 crimes committed by foreign nationals. And foreign nationals alone. Meanwhile, what are our politicians and things like that concerned with? Well, the traditional PC stuff and obviously censorship. Censorship being the biggest one. And obviously then opening more legal routes for migrants. And the Pope obviously having coming out and spoken about recently how we need to basically get along with Islam. Contrary to his, predecessor about 1,000 years ago. Whose vision of getting along with Islam was, very, very much different. Pope Urban II. A lot of people, even devout Catholics and stuff like that, being very disaffected with the Pope at the moment. It is embarrassing. The Pope has been absolutely embarrassing. Obviously, Francis was bad, obviously, but in many ways couldn't have got off to much of a worse start, especially when he was it earlier on this year or last year? He was elected via the conclave. It is embarrassing. But von der Leyen, for example, pushing for expanded legal migration routes into Europe to help those who dream of a better life. What about the Europeans that dream of a better life? What about the native Europeans of their own countries that want a better life for themselves and their family? And that the government should be doing what they can for them first and foremost. But no, the EU is one of the many blocs that wants to ferry these people in to subvert democracy using democracy so that they can imprison those native populations and force them to go along with the increasing totalitarian measures. In her speech at the Global Migration Conference in Brussels, probably gone with a charter private flight in business class, right, with emitting all kinds of CO2, despite the fact that, again, these same people will be the first to lecture you about your carbon emissions and stuff like that. No point did von der Leyen address the rising crime rates among foreign nationals or the rising feeling of insecurity felt among Europeans because she does not care. She does not care. In many instances, the EU, her organisation, are the chief ones trying to censor it and cover it up, as we'll go over in a moment. The European Union, she said, must expand legal migration channels to intensify pressure on criminal networks behind illegal border crossings. Like I spoke about with Rob Kagenvan, when the police in Guernsey were using that illegal filter, what did they do? They just made it legal. So the illegal systems that we're seeing now, what are they just going to do? They're just going to make them legal. They're just going to ferry more people through the legal immigration system, which if you have a look in Britain, for example, oh no, bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. You can stay paused for a minute. That would have been a nightmare. So as we were saying, I can't remember exactly where I was, but again, whole thing, do something illegal, just make the thing legal. That's what they did in the UK. Opinion poll against immigration strongly changed in the 1950s, going from quite broadly in favour of immigration to very quickly being about 3 and 4 against on a national scale and over 4 and 5 against in a scale in London, right? As in favor of immigration controls. Making the whole system, really, you could argue, from that point onwards, from the Windrush generation onwards, a completely illegal and illegitimate system, right? Because the British people didn't want it. They were forced. They were forced to go along with it. All the while, they called it legal. They called it legal. And obviously now they want to make the focus less on... People are cutting on to how much of a problem legal immigration is versus illegal immigration, right? Illegal immigration being a drop in the bucket, right? They're now trying to make the little remainder that is currently illegal immigration legal. That's what they're trying to do. So again, it just disarms people from being able to talk about it. The biggest defense people have at the moment is, oh, these people came here legally. Oh yeah, that was the problem. The system that they came here on was completely illegitimate and illegal to begin with. They can be victims of immigration as well. They can be victims of immigration as well, but it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the reality. Von der Leyen argued that creating structured, regulated routes into the EU is essential if the bloc wants to reduce reliance on smuggling networks. Maybe we could just crack down on the smuggling networks and keep people out, you know? Like Pete Hegseth and Trump are doing with the drug runners and the drug boats at the moment. You know, setting a pretty good example. Even Franklin getting involved in taking on these narco-terrorists. We must open more safe pathways, legal pathways to Europe, and it would just massively accelerate the replacement. It would just massively accelerate the replacement that's going on. We don't need the skills. Just say that, oh, we need to make sure people can find a job where their talent is needed, bringing skills across our borders. Our public services and all manner of other services have gotten worse, right? People can see that. People experience it every single day. Won't cotton on to the actual reasons why. They forget that they were perfectly well skilled enough, educated enough, and able enough to do it in the first place. And in fact, when they were doing it, i.e. when our previous generations were doing it, things tended to work a lot better. We were perfectly qualified enough, so perfectly smart enough to do these things. We did not need any of the skills from elsewhere. Again, you can just use this example in Britain. It's quite easy because we have a very accomplished history in this regard of not only making Britain a hotbed for progress, technological innovation and stuff like that, but exporting that to the rest of the world, exporting that all throughout the empire. You know, colonies that we had as part of the British Empire in Africa and other places were bastions of innovation and bastions of civilization. Otherwise, completely uncharted, civilized tribal areas, right? You go back to many of the areas of Africa today, that's what they looked like back then. And then you look at Rhodesia and the British colonies and stuff like that, you see the difference. That came from us. That came from our people. And was exported elsewhere. It didn't come from other people and then brought in. It came from us. We started the Industrial Revolution. We started these things. And then we took that to elsewhere in the world. And in a lot of ways made those places a lot better. Rhodesia, easy example to point to. We don't need these skills when people are coming from many places where, again, they don't have running and clean water. What skills could they possibly bring, for the most part? When they have literal trash rivers that you can walk through, you can walk on top of. Mounds and mounds of rubbish. Literally going through canals that divide parts of cities in like Bangladesh and areas like that. They got no waste disposal networks or anything like that. So what do? They just chuck it in the middle of this canal and leave it? What do we have to gain from that? By letting those people here, we directly import that. Because you think those people are going to leave their customs behind, just magically change overnight as they cross the border? No, that's why you see that many of the big cities in Britain have become completely completely ghettoified, if you will. Where they have all of these waste problems. Birmingham, there's rats everywhere. The masses of black bags and everything. And what's the solution to that? Obviously, more strikes. More strikes and more labour enforcement, more labour union enforcement, to enforce more of the same and seemingly fleece the taxpayer of more and more, it would seem, because they're obviously the ones that foot the bill for all of this stuff. Communism is great. Just communism is great, isn't it? But as I mentioned, EU touts about bringing people in through legal routes and safe routes and all of this stuff, at the same time censoring stories like this. A French youth by the name of Killian having his face carved into the Joker's smile by a homeless Caribbean migrant in Paris. These young French victims attacked by a homeless migrant are having their stories silenced by the EU's leadership. Check this out. EU censors story of French youth Killian having his face carved into the Joker's smile by a homeless migrant. There you go. You can see that. Viewer discretion advised, ladies and gentlemen. That happened to a young French man. Had his face, so for those of you who are not watching but listening, from the edges of his lips, probably about an inch or two either way, you've got masses of stitches just going straight across his face, out from the side of his lips. Or again, you imagine if somebody had carved into their face, carved a smile into someone's face from the edges of their lips. That's what you're talking about. That's the kind of shit that we're talking about here. Remix News has seen more and more posts and news items censored in recent weeks, likely due to the EU Digital Service Act, which is already predicted to lead a wave of censorship across Europe. Today, Remix News had yet another post censored, this time involving French youth Killian, who had his face slashed open into a Joker's smile by a homeless migrant from Guadeloupe. The suspect told police he was the Joker. Remix News' post on this attack was censored almost immediately. The remarkable aspect of this censorship is that it involves a young couple subjected to a horrifying experience who are being silenced simply because European censors do not like the story. Young woman spoke to French journalist Tony Pitaro and detailed the case. Remix News is providing the link. So you can find this link to this article down below if you want to go and read it, ladies and gentlemen. The story basically is that on November 9th, they were out for a night out in the centre of Paris. For this person's birthday, Killian was taking her to Paris for the weekend because they're from Brittany. And a homeless man by the name of Haku H, he confronted the couple and he slashed Killian's face, carving a smile into his cheeks, which can be seen in the, as I said, the article's headline photo, which required 23 stitches. He said he was the Batman's Joker and wanted to reproduce Joker's smile on all the victims he came across. And this is what the EU will censor to push forward their agenda. They don't care how many young girls were for racial and religious reasons. They do not care about Killian and his face being slashed open. They do not care about any of the scenarios that we've talked about today. They care about fining Hungary to the tune of €1 million every day for not accepting this. And Poland for not accepting this. That should tell you, if you're a European, British, French, Polish, German, the list goes on, who your real enemy is. And how this massive swath of the world, these massive countries with tens of millions of people, is being controlled by the iron fist of a tiny bureaucratic establishment in Brussels, which could be bulldozed overnight if we wanted to. Yet again, we tolerate it. It stops when we say it does. It stops when we say it does. The lecturing about white privilege stops when we say it does. Just Ireland's Deputy PM defended the Irish government's allocation of €100,000 to a school programme teaching children about quote-unquote white privilege. A white man, Killian, has just had, as we saw, ladies and gentlemen, or I don't know when I don't know when it actually was. It was November 9th. I don't know whether it was this year or last year or any other year. We just covered the story of a white man that had his face carved open into a Joker smile. But yet, obviously, the big boogeyman, as it always is the ever-present, is it in the room with us right now? White privilege.
The government has renewed funding for the Yellow Flag program, which is operating in schools across the country. And as part of its anti-racism training that it's giving to students, it's teaching them about concepts like white privilege, the idea that all white people have inherent advantages in life because of the color of their skin. Do you think that that's an appropriate thing that children should be taught about in schools?
So I'm not sure exactly how it's taught or into the detail of the curriculum, but I do know the Amber Flag project, and I do think it's a really important.
Well, the Yellow Flag.
Sorry, Yellow Flag project. And I do know it to be an important project that does teach about democracy.
So important, he didn't even know the name. So important, he didn't even know the name, but he's more than happy to give 100,000 of the Irish taxpayer money towards it to lecture children and to put children through these disgusting struggle sessions about white supremacy. All the while, everything, their birthright, is being rapidly taken from them. Disgusting.
Diversity, inclusion and anti-racism in our schools. It is an initiative that I'm supportive of.
He's a disgusting, traitorous race Marxist is what he is.
And I do think these things are caught in an appropriate way.
But on the white privilege point, I mean, do you understand why some parents would find that to be a troubling idea that children are being taught to view themselves and others through a racial lens about who has advantages and privileges on the basis of their race? Is that not an inherently racist concept?
No, I do think racism is a reality in our society.
Sure, but that's sort of a separate...
It depends on how you frame it, and you'll frame it a certain way, and that's fine. But I do think there are facts in relation to racism in this country. Racism is real in this country, and the reality is people of minority backgrounds, people of different races do experience racism in the country. And not just in Ireland, and I think it's important that we teach our children about these things at a young age and in an appropriate way.
Yeah,
appropriate way is obviously not teaching them that they're inherent oppressors based on the colour of their skin and putting themselves through struggle sessions in the name of multiculturalism and diversity from the minute they attend frigging primary school, from the minute they're like 4 or 5 years old. Obviously then you say that no, your school's teaching your little young Timmy, the next thing you know, your social services are coming around, they'll take your kid away from you because you're a danger to them. You're a danger to them because you're a danger to the government's narrative. And obviously that's where the family, parents, you're the number one defense for your kids, and you need to be. You need to be. That was a worst possible time for my voice to break. You need to be. Because they have no one else. You have a good amount of teachers in school that will go along with this begrudgingly, even though they don't want to. You do have a good few, however, that are ardent followers of this religion and take pride and take pleasure in distorting your children's minds. You do. It's what the state school system breeds. Think about it. You might think they're spending time with Mrs. Robinson or Mr. Davis or Mr. Chaturanga, whatever it might be. You know, Mr. Mohammed or Mrs. Nadeem for 6 hours a day, all of the different teachers and so on. They're spending 6 to 8 hours a day with the government. That's what they're doing. Spending 6 to 8 hours of the day with the government, and this is what their heads are being filled with. This is what their heads are being filled with, the race Marxist filth. But yeah, we do have instances of racism going on in this country. Yeah, like in many places in Britain, where now the native Briton is a minority, or in minority status. And little girls are getting, because they're being viewed as white slags, white trash. This is what white girls are for. It's what they're good for. It's the only thing that they're good for. The little sluts. That's what they called them. Yeah. Yeah, racism absolutely does exist. In many ways, not just in the way that the government would like you to believe. And what you're seeing now, where you're seeing a lot of people have changed in ways that they wouldn't have before, it's a response to exactly this. It's a response to the racist policies that have been employed against the native people of these countries for political gain. Chiefly, the responsibility and resentment should always be diverted back at the government, rather than any one individual. You have examples of people that have been convicted of crimes, and yeah, they deserve exactly what they should get. In many instances, they should be made examples of. You know, chief gang orchestrators and stuff like that. Yeah, make examples of them, don't care. Not talking about that. But just the average, regular immigrant or anything like that as well may not have done anything wrong other than just being a victim of the same weaponization system on the part of our own political establishment themselves. Always direct your anger back at the government. That's our chief enemy, as far as I'm concerned. Our own government. If our own government hadn't enabled this, we wouldn't even be having any of these discussions. It wouldn't even be on the table. Right? None of the atrocities of the 20th century would have happened. People had listened, if the government had listened. But no, they were hell-bent on an agenda. They were hell-bent on forwarding an agenda. Their people didn't matter. People of Britain, people of France, people of Germany, people of Poland, people of Hungary, people of Italy, people of rattle off the countries. The people of the world that are already a global minority. They're already a global minority. Those specific people. Because for the most part, they've been a very successful, innovative, and exporting of good ideas people. Right? No, they must be subjugated. Their ways of life naturally made them quite resistant to totalitarian systems, at least in the modern era. You know, you had feudal systems and stuff like that. You had monarchs and all this stuff, right? Nothing really like we've seen in the modern day. So why the government had to spend so long trying to literally rewire people. And they've done that through the school system. Why do you think they tried to make it so hard to homeschool? Why do you think they tried so hard to push both parents into work? Why do you think they said to women in particular, go, you don't need no man. Be a boss, babe. Be this, be that. And be a slut while you're at it. And kill your kids. How many abortions you've got. It's your human right. Because they knew that it would tear at the fabric of that society. It would rip they would rip that society up by the roots. But then obviously, problem, reaction, they come in with the solution. Ronald Reagan, quite, liberal for the most part as a conservative. I think there's a lot of bad things that he done, right? Pretty good on a lot of things from what I understand, right? School system didn't paint him that way, obviously. I actually had quite a similar first start in employment to Ronald Reagan. We were both lifeguards in our youth. It's quite interesting. He said there's nothing more terrifying than somebody coming to your house and saying, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. Because the government always wants to fuel their agenda. They'll just try and make you think that it's for your benefit. They're always the one getting their fruits at the end of the day. It's always them that will be benefiting more from the deal, not you. And in many instances, they're outright benefiting at your expense. Oh yeah, family gets to go and work 2 jobs, go work on their careers and whatever. Government, yeah, cheer that on, right? They get more tax. They get to pay more tax because they got 2 taxable incomes, right? And they get access to your kids for 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. What more could a treasonous government ask for? When they want to, obviously, the next generation into thinking that these ideas are normal from that young age. What more could a treasonous government like that ask for? Not much. Not much. There's not really much more that they could ask for. All the while, pitting the 2 parents often against each other, making them compete against each other, whereas before it would be perfectly understood what each one's role would be. And now, thinking this whole system, now that it's become normal, is actually a good thing. It's a normalization that is making it really dangerous. So normalization is making it really dangerous. Now, there's one more thing that I wanted to go through. And again, this is just sort of a final story, so to speak, to go over. That I think is more, it's more so just one of those stories you read and you go, it's like, it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back in this episode. Knowing that this is an example of what your public defenders, right? Not barristers, but police officers, police constables in this country are doing. This is back to my home country of Wales again for this last one. We're looking at, published yesterday in Wales Online, a police officer has been sacked over pictures he took in the gym. Again, you understand just how, again, a lot of these people you need to be concerned with, you might never even know who the hell that they are, right? Little things will often make them known. See maybe things they share on Facebook and stuff like that. Gives you an idea as to, you know, maybe you want to associate with them or not. Other things as well, like giveaways as to, you know, what they believe and stuff like that. You can make inferences from it. Other times it's more overt, like outright harassing people via telecommunications in a gym and exhibiting outright stalkish behavior. All the whilst, mind you, you are a police constable. He is a police constable. He was using an alias in this instance to send gym members disturbing messages. Police officer has been sacked. Seemingly no charge has been brought against this guy, mind you. Don't know whether it's because the actual victims in these instances don't want to press charges. A South Wales police officer whose name and rank is being kept secret by the force, oh dear, I wonder why, set up an Instagram account under an alias and used it to bombard gym goers with messages such as what I can only presume, I'll bring this article up on screen so you can see it, ladies and gentlemen, because it's been asterisked out. This quote, part of it has been asterisked out. You'll see why in a moment. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this would translate to, when you remove the asterisk, probably something to the effect of, "Can you in my mouth?" Seems like something quite uncouth for a police officer, police constable of Wales to say. The officer's predatory behaviour took place in 2023 when he was a member of the gym in South Wales. Obviously, South Wales, quite a large area. Quite a large area. Could be many. There's many gyms in South Wales. So obviously, who's going to fall afoul of this guy next, we would then speculate. He did not personally know the two members he targeted, so he presumed that this is not some kind of weird, twisted joke he's playing on his friends. But he targeted two people who had been given the code names Mr. A and Mr. B in the police conduct hearing. The only reasons given by the South Wales Police for his anonymity are the embarrassing nature, you don't say, of the case and how naming him could have an adverse impact on him and his family. I do feel for his family, so I can understand that to a certain extent. I think that for the police force falls secondary to the embarrassment on the force, right? Obviously, it already has enough of embarrassment in its history anyway, from the whole Peter and Avril Griffith saga, from the Ian Watkins saga, right? Obviously, there's many other police constabularies that are implicated in that as well. But this is just extremely embarrassing and just really kind of grotesque when you look at the kind of things that these gym goers are being sent. Mr. A began to receive explicit messages from an Instagram account under the name Lawrence Hendricks. One example was, "When you see the movement in your grey joggers makes mouth watering." This was in early 2023. In August that year, Mr. B received messages from the same account that included, "Can I see your," presumably it means, "how big is your, what about OnlyFans? I want you to on my face. I love it swollen. Can you in my mouth? This is the really creepy part, which you can see here. You might think this is just trolling or whatever. It's obviously unbecoming of a police officer, regardless of if he's on duty or not. On September 21st, these are members of the public, right? September 21st, 2021. September 21st of the same year. The officer took 2 photos of Mr. A exercising at the gym without his knowledge. Now that is stalkerish behavior. That is actually really bad stalkerish behavior, in my opinion. Because I know that can you just imagine it? It's a classic horror movie trope that the protagonist of the film is sat in a room and there's the stalker, right? And next thing you know, she sent a photo of her inside the through the window of her home, right? And then she looks out and either sees the shadowy figure out there or there's no figure out there. And then she receives another photo. Typically it's a female, that's the protagonist, right? Then receives another photo. Then from a different place where usually the would-be stalker or assailant is slightly closer. It's getting the impression that this person is wanting to instill this sense of fear, being like, look, I'm getting closer, these kinds of things, right? This is disgusting. It's obviously absolutely disgusting. It's a police officer. This is the guy, if you had a stalking case, would show up to your house trying to advise you and saying he's going to protect you. And he's doing this to members of the gym. The gym manager then reported to police the members and staff at the gym had been receiving unsolicited messages from the account. The decision notice does not go into detail about the messages sent to staff. God knows what was in them. God knows what was in them. So eventually, given that obviously there's metadata for these photos, given that they can triangulate where the photos were taken from, the photo in this instance was taken from a first floor balcony of the gym and was taken down towards where the victim was on the ground floor. They corroborated this with CCTV and then saw that it was this guy, whoever this guy was, the police constable, that was likely the one taking the photos. But what was more pressing, what was more damning for him, is that he said that he didn't have any connections to the account, but they found that his email was linked to the account. So again, that is pretty conclusive that, either you were running this account or somebody has got your email and is running the account from your email, in which case, why does somebody else have your email? Did you pass it on? Did you get hacked? What happened? The phone handed over by the officer on his arrest was likely not the phone he used to take the pictures, citing his immediate confidence and cooperation with officers when he was arrested at his home address. Phone seized and the PIN willingly provided. Ms. Gilmer said the officer had engaged in unwanted conduct which was predatory in nature and disregarded privacy. The use of the Lawrence Hendricks Instagram account necessitated a degree of preparation and pre-planning and thoughtfulness. Yeah, that's exactly right. This wasn't random. It was obviously well thought out. It's obviously well thought out. Either maybe he knew this person, he knew these people, and he was targeting them really weirdly in this way. Again, maybe, I don't know what things are going on in this guy's brain, what maybe material has he been exposed to, or weird things are going on inside his brain that's making him think that this is any way acceptable, or what he wanted to get out of it. Maybe in his mind he thought that this was his way of getting across to his people, or these people, that he was attracted to them and was his way of touching base, so to speak. His way of touching base, in which case, what does that say about his mental state? This person's put in a position to protect and serve. This person's put in a position to protect and serve. That should terrify you. That should really terrify you. And again, it's people in all the regular positions and regular people that will then be some of the most ardent followers of this stuff, and you'd be surprised. Oftentimes they got wild purple hair and tattoos and piercings at the wazoo and all of this stuff, and the way they walk, the mannerisms, all of this stuff, you can usually tell with people, right? A lot of them, they just seem really, really normal a lot of the time, but they're your teachers, they're in your hospitals, they're in your police force, they're in your fire service, they're in your ambulances. right? They're in your civil services and they're on your councils and all of this stuff, right? Really, really damaging, obviously, for public cohesion. Really, really damaging for public trust. And throw that in with all the other things that we've talked about today, you get a really damning picture of Western, in particular British society, don't you? Obviously, the first step in any program that you would have to resolve any other kind of problem would be that you first have to honestly acknowledge the problem. Because like the first stage of grief is denial, if you're not willing to acknowledge it, if you're not even going to say that it's there, if it's not there, what do you have to fix? Nothing. If there's no problem there, you have nothing to fix, so what are you going on about? But obviously, at the societal level, and obviously that is just an extension of every individual's personal habits, virtues and values and so on, and their conduct on a daily basis, and their beliefs, we have serious problems. We have serious problems, and they need to be rooted out. That's why I'm excited with some of the things that I'm working on in the near future. And I've hopefully got somebody quite interesting coming on the podcast very soon, hopefully, to talk about more of the things that I spoke about with Kimberly Isherwood on that front. And again, another person I'm going to be working on with some projects coming up to really bring some things forward and really start affecting some positive change. Be looking forward when we've actually got some legway with that. Hopefully be able to say more about it. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, listening, guys. Obviously, we do have some serious problems that we need to address, particularly in British society. And obviously now I'm preaching to a lot of the converted here. But you can think of it, and I'll leave you with this. The one little concept which I like is the I'm trying to think, the principle of aggregation of marginal gains, I think it's called. Can't remember the British cycling coach that coined this phrase, but I first came across this phrase when I was reading the World's Fittest book by Ross Edgley. Massive, positive influence for me, in my opinion, you know, during times when I was working in gyms and stuff like that. And, I don't know much about Ross's politics on these key issues and stuff like that, but just seems like a really positive, affable, likable guy. Yeah, I went to see him in person in Cardiff one time, very, very good few years ago, pre-COVID, I believe it was, or maybe just after, I can't remember. Really affable, really likable guy, and obviously fit as a fiddle, just insane, right? And again, guys, he'd be very open-minded, particularly with regards to training, very relatable guy, and really wants to go and put himself in those scenarios from a fitness perspective. Really goes and puts himself in those scenarios where he learns by doing. He'd been to Loughborough, all sorts of sports specific training and testing down there, right? When he was writing his World's Fittest book, obviously he done the Great British Swim, where obviously he swam around the island of Great Britain. He's at sea for, I think it was 167 days, right? But the aggregation of marginal gains, it is called, basically stems from this story about the British cycling team just before Chris Froome, I believe it was, came along, where they were really struggling. They were really, really struggling. And basically what they did is they said, right, we're just going to focus every single day on getting 1% better however we can. Now that might be a very small innovation in bike technology, trying to figure out different ways to improve recovery, nutrition strategies, sleep strategies, all of these things, right? But all of these little things that are little components of the overall system is the athlete and the bike that then corroborates or translates into the Olympic winning performance, right? We're going to try and make that 1% better every single day, right? And then not long after this guy came in with this philosophy, they went on to win, a bunch of Olympic and I think, Commonwealth golds. I believe it was not long after that. Chris Froome, I believe it was. I believe Ross Edgley basically called these a set of lungs and legs. That's what he affectionately calls them, right? went on to give some of his best performances. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he won back-to-back Tour de France's, if I'm not mistaken, in like 2018 and 2019, or 2019 and 2020. Either way, they went on this insane run. The British cycling team then went on this insane run. And it all came, I'm not sure how they're doing now, but it all came from this one principle of getting 1% better every single day in the things that matter. There's so many ways that you can translate this across, not just in political, like discourse and stuff like that. More so when you're looking at personal habits every day. We all have things that we can do better. Obviously, we all have vices, right? We all have things that let us down. We all have negative things and so on, right? There's all of these things that we could always do better. A lot of the times, and I saw people trying to get in shape and everything like this as well, and I'm trying to advise them dietary when I was working in gyms and stuff like that. They want to throw everything at the kitchen sink really quickly. They might get a lot of results really quickly, but they very quickly then crash and burn. And usually they end up in this really damaging yo-yo dieting phase. I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. Where their weight goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And usually there's a lot of negative mechanisms come into play with this very fast weight loss and very quick weight regain phases, right? That then make it subsequently harder and harder to lose weight with every single opportunity. And usually then their natural weight climbs and climbs and climbs and climbs. They end up in massive amounts of despair. It's really awful, right? Because doing it this way, starting off slow and trying to make it a little bit better every single day, because it's not instantly rewarding, because you don't get on the scale one day later and see that you've had a massive weight adjustment or whatever it is, or you don't wake up the next day and you look like Hugh Jackman in Wolverine or whatever. Because it's very slow and you don't see the results straight away, it's very hard to appreciate. But it does lead to the really appreciable and long-standing changes over time. There's a parable from, even from scripture, those who build their house on the sand versus those who build their house on a good foundation. Right, because those who build their house on the stone. Going to try and go really fast and trying to make all these changes in one go, particularly with regards to your health and stuff like that, it's a bit like building a house on the sand, because it's not built to last. It's very quickly going to get swept away. And usually then you end up in a worse position than you started. You've got to rebuild all those raw materials again. You've got to get all those raw materials, try and rebuild the house again. And it gets harder and harder every single time because you get more and more progressively worn down with each house that gets torn down because you're building on a really poor foundation. But if you take the time to really carve out the foundation, I'm going through this at the moment, trying to teach people in one of the gyms I work at how to bench press properly. I'm like, look, you're probably just going to be stuck with this thing for the next few weeks or months, whatever it is, just practicing, refining the technique, and just the first thing that will happen is your nervous system will adapt, and then you'll be able to put on weight, because the first thing will happen, you'll get better at coordinating, you'll get better at doing the actual movement until that becomes second nature. The problem of putting weight on the bar is absolutely secondary. Yes, it can be good to put a little bit of weight on the bar from time to time to reinforce that technique under a little bit of stress. But you're building that very strong foundation. So those then who don't build a foundation, right, then try to go and bench their absolute max, and they end up tearing pec tendons, or they end up damaging their elbows, wrists, all shoulders, all manner of things, right? Because again, that strong foundation wasn't built. Now, it's not just health and fitness. It could just be, again, making one healthy meal versus what you would have had takeout before, right? All of these things. It can be going to bed a little bit earlier, or reading a chapter of a book in bed versus scrolling on your phone, whatever it may be, trying to just read maybe 1 or 2 pages of a book and then put it down, then gradually trying to add more and more and more till you're up to 1 chapter every night, whatever it might be. Start off with an area that you're in, start off with a type of genre that you enjoy. It might be fiction, perfect start. Get started, get into the habit. Then maybe you start branching out into more non-fiction, for example, or things where you learn from certain things, big authors that you might enjoy and stuff like that. And like a quote from Patrick Bet-David in this regard is, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. And the one thing where you are a leader, one thing where everybody is a leader, is they're a leader of their own life. If you've got a family, especially if you're a man, you're a leader of that family. There's a certain amount of duty that comes from there, right? If you have your own household, it's your duty to be the leader of that household. And as a result, you have to be learned. You have to be, at least have a certain semblance of knowledgeable foundation from other people's experiences. Other people's experiences can be a massive learning tool. Why is the books like the Gulag Archipelago so popular? Alexander Solzhenitsyn and these people, right? It's the reason why they're so popular. It's the reason why they're so popular. It's because their experiences, and we're seeing a lot of the things that they said now bearing out in real time. That might be another one we should go down the route of. But again, don't expect to read the book in one night. Maybe you can. Maybe you're like Jordan B. Peterson in his youth if he says what he's to be believed and he was reading like multiple books every week. Okay, maybe that's you. In which case, crack on, knock yourself out. Knock yourself out, because that's far more than I could ever do. Right? And I'm giving this address as much to myself as anybody else. Because I need it. I need it as well. Because I have a lot of things that I wanted to do. You know, a lot of positive habits that I once had have fallen by the wayside. Aggregation and marginal gains. Think 1% every single day. And you'd be surprised if everybody done that, how much better society would look in, 10 years, 20 years time. Yeah, thinking back then to how much then that would translate over to, first off, creating a more positive society. Just one thing, when we're talking about all the problems coming from outside, when we're talking about immigration, when we're talking about colonization, foreigners, all of this stuff, right? That's one aspect. But we need to look at the other aspect as well. Right? Which one is more pressing than the other? You see people with different viewpoints on. I think given how much we have the deck stacked against us from our own government, from foreign interests, more of these things, I certainly think that is more pressing at this moment in time than the other. But we do need to look at those things as well. The biggest hurdle for most people in that regard is going to be questioning their own worldviews and really, really scrutinizing it. But that is enough of my soapbox monologue for the end of it. One thing I'd just say is try and focus in whatever way you can. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter how small, no matter how ineffectual it may seem, let's try, and as I will be doing as well, trying to get that 1% better every single day. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, good night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. And you take care now. Godspeed.